Hi everyone, Danny Bader here, and welcome to another episode of Back to Life, our podcast where I interview people from all walks of life to hear their stories and the insight and wisdom they've gained on this wonderful journey called life. So enjoy the episode and be sure to pay attention to what inspires you to create more happiness and fulfillment in your life, because that's what we're here for, right? Hi everybody, it's Danny Bader, and welcome back to another edition of our podcast, Back to Life. You know, on these podcasts, I like to have guests that have been on the journey of life, sometimes a little bit more interesting, and the wisdom that they've gotten out of that. So I was introduced to our guest today, Hoyt Richards, from a friend of mine that I went to college with, and Hoyt and I spoke a few times. Yeah. And I'm in LA now, so you may hear some planes going over because we're at a hotel right there near LA. And Hoyt was gracious enough to hang out. And
believe it, the pleasure's mine.
Yeah.
We just couple Philly guys reconnecting. It's always good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We just grabbed a beer and watched some March Madness because that's it. But we're going to kind of jump into it. So Hoyt is from Philadelphia. Grew up there. Went to Conestoga High School.
Yeah.
So why don't you real quick just kind of fill people in, you know, our listeners and audience, in Conestoga High School and then kind of through college.
Yeah, I mean,
real quick.
I'm one of 6 kids. You know, we grew up on the main line, went to Conestoga, then I went transferred to Harvard School for a couple of years. You know, the private school, and then spent a year actually going to school in England.
Oh, okay.
Where that was outside of London. That was an eye-opening, you know, kind of first time out of the country, amazing thing. And then and it's where kind of I developed my wanderlust to want to see the world.
Sure.
And then I came back and went to Princeton for 4 years.
Okay.
And graduated in 1985.
Right.
And then moved immediately up to New York City to pursue a modeling career, which came out of the blue, but kind of.
But now Princeton, you played football.
I played football.
Right.
Yeah, I played football.
And
there.
you wanted to go to the NFL.
Yeah, I did want to go to, as delusional,
catch some touchdown passes,
delusional
right?
as that may have been. I
Super
did that.
Bowl ring.
That was an aspiration.
Yeah, I like it.
And now that the Eagles have a Super Bowl ring, I feel like I can rest peacefully.
Good.
You know, and but yeah, I mean, football was at that time. If you had met me, I would have said, I'm a football player. Like, that was my identity.
Sure.
So when it turned out that I couldn't play, that was really kind of a crisis that I went through.
Yeah.
But I ended up, and that was actually, it was through that crisis that I ended up going up to New York to see a shoulder specialist, and that's how someone saw me. I got involved with the modeling business, and
so you're up there to get your shoulder looked at, and some guy or lady just saw you and
basically
said,
the way it worked is I had a friend up in New York that after I'd seen the doctor, I was going to meet him for lunch, and we went and had lunch, and he was an actor, and he was mostly just doing commercials. So we had lunch, and he said, "Listen, I got to stop by my agent's office to talk to them about something. Do you mind waiting for me?" Because I was just going to hang out with him. So I was just sitting in the lobby waiting for him while he went to go see his agent. And then another agent kind of sticks their head out the door and says, "Are you here to see me?" And I'm like, "No."
Right.
And he's like, "Well, you here to see someone in the office?" I'm like, "No." I said, "I got a friend here." He's like, "Are you an actor?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Will you come talk to me?"
Yeah.
So, and I just found out from the doctor, because I had gone up to New York to see a shoulder specialist to kind of get a second opinion. And I just found out from the doctor that I was about to enter my junior year. And he said, "There's no way you could play your junior year with your shoulder. We could operate, we might have you ready by senior year, but we can't necessarily even guarantee you full mobility, meaning that you may not be able to reach all the way up. You may only be like here." And I said, "Well, if I'm playing defensive back, I got to have full reach in my arm."
Yeah.
So
and receiver too.
Yeah, exactly.
Receiver,
So I was like, I don't know if this makes sense. So I was kind of hitting that devastation, and then alternatively on the same day, someone's like, "I think maybe you could do commercials. You ever thought about doing that?" So in that 20-year-old mentality of, well, if I can't be a football star, maybe I'll just try to be a star. That was literally the segue of the way it played out. And so I went through the kind of starving actor routine for a little while. And I spent a couple summers in New York doing that. And then by the time I graduated, I'd been introduced to Ford models, and then I'd been introduced to this well-known photographer named Bruce Weber. And he had kind of put me on the map. So by the time I graduated college, I walked into a working modeling career.
Wow.
And going to an Ivy League school where you're so conditioned to do the right thing and, you know, make your mark in the world. And I just kind of like the idea of like, you know, I don't know really what I want to do,
Right.
but the idea of modeling for a couple of years and seeing the
Sure.
world and meeting girls and all these, you know,
Sure.
I'm like, let me do that.
Great
And,
money, right?
yeah.
Phenomenal.
And so I figured I'd just give it a whirl, and then it ended up just taking off.
Yeah.
So I was lucky that way.
Yeah. So now as you're in that, and you know, everybody, listeners might say, "Man, that's unbelievable." You know, football player, Ivy League, and now you stepped in. You're doing modeling. You got the world on a string.
Yeah. Well.
And then some things kind of happened. So what happened, man?
Well, it's one of these things. You know, it's like I think it's funny. You go through life, and you know, labels are very useful, but
Right.
they're also, you know, very limiting. And you know, so you could have said like I was like a scholar athlete. You know, I went to an Ivy League school. All these things that sound
You
great.
studied in London,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You know, all
yeah.
these things that sound great. The other label that I can say now at this point in my life is I'm also a cult survivor, because, you know, while this whole thing was going on, and it started at the time when I was 16, I had met this guy.
So cult survivor.
Cult survivor.
I just want to make sure the audience
Yeah,
gets
and
that,
you know,
right?
and
because some of them are probably going, "What the hell did he say?"
did he just say cult? Yeah, and
He played for the Colts.
Yeah, right, exactly. And cult it's an important word because it's a word that's misunderstood, and it's very triggering. Like, I certainly know in my youth and younger years, hearing the word cult brought up the images of the Moonies or Jonestown
Sure.
or Charlie Manson, like extreme, horrific images.
Right.
And something that I would never believe I would ever, or someone like you, anyone
Sure.
that I would know would ever get involved with.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a perception, whether I was aware of it or not, of who I thought that might happen to, and that certainly wasn't me.
Right.
So I think one of those things that, you know, when I actually say that to someone, that I'm a cult survivor or I was in a cult for, you know, 20 years, people immediately have this reaction, and I kind of have to wheel them back
Right.
into explaining really the semantics behind that word of what it means. And the truth is, I label myself in this way as a cult survivor, but in many ways, almost anyone you will meet is a cult survivor, because the word cult, when you play it out into how it plays in relationships, the term cultic relationship, which is a clinical term that therapists use, is normally a one-on-one relationship,
Right.
where the person you're seeking the love and approval from is the person who's simultaneously controlling and abusing you in some way.
Right.
So I don't know anyone, I haven't met anyone in my life who hasn't encountered that, whether it may be a coach, a teacher, a boss, a parent, a sibling, a lover.
Sure.
You know, we've all had those relationships where you don't understand the dynamics at play, but you find that no matter what you do, it never seems to be enough, and no matter how hard you try, you're always being put down, and you just, you know, you get in this situation where you usually at some point identify as being unhealthy, and you get out of it, but because you don't actually label it, you don't actually understand the dynamics that were at play,
Sure.
you don't necessarily heal from it, and quite often that pattern gets repeated.
Yeah, right.
So the cult that the guy I was in is that dynamic, but you add in, obviously there's a peer pressure element because there's a group dynamic.
Sure.
So that's dialing it up a bit. And then
Which again shows up in life, right? Coaches, team members, parents.
Absolutely.
I
And
mean,
then
there's always-
you know, in a one-on-one relationship, the stakes are there just to make this one person happy, you know,
Sure.
get their approval. But with like my group, we were one of these doomsday cults, so it's basically the fate of the world lies in balance. So it's like dialing the whole thing up on steroids. Like everything you're doing is playing into this catastrophe that the world is waiting for, that either you are going to be part of the problem or you are going to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
So that type of raising stakes and putting people on eggshells makes things very, very intense.
And it was called, what was it?
It was called Eternal Values,
Eternal Values.
which is kind of catchy, you know. But
That's good
you know, but,
tagline,
you know,
right?
that, you know, be careful. You know, when things sound too good, usually they are.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, Eternal
So
Values.
how'd that start? How'd that journey start?
So I met Freddie, and Freddie's an interesting character because his name was Freddie Myers. Of course, the person I met was Frederick von Mears. Now, Freddie Myers was born in Brooklyn, Jewish guy, and he, I think his parents owned a laundromat or some sort of thing like that. But the guy I met on Nantucket, you know, on the beach, was Frederick von Mears, who had this Dutch heritage, and he had manufactured this whole kind of lineage behind himself, and was very arch wasp and this whole type of thing. And
he had an accent, no? I mean,
he didn't really have an accent per se. He just didn't have a Brooklyn accent.
Right. Yeah.
And he had a very, as he would describe, a very arch way of expressing himself. He was very into the social register and the so-called high society life.
Sure.
So he would drop the names of dukes and duchesses and princes and ladies and whatever, all of that. That was very much so not a world that I was interested in, but it was used to kind of perpetuate. I've come to learn in retrospect that these narcissistic personalities, they build their self-image by those they surround themselves by.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
So it's always, generally it starts out with a narcissist and an entourage, and then usually something can be a catalyst where it become actually cultic, and in my experience, I basically watched that happen in the sense that I got in on the ground floor of the startup that became a cult, because when I met him in Nantucket, it was just someone I knew on the beach. He had a couple friends there, and he was very social, and I had friends in my peer group who had talked about him. So when I had this encounter with him, I'm like, oh, this is the guy they must have been telling me about.
So you were going to Nantucket for years as a family?
As my family, that was, and as we talked about earlier, if I had one word to describe Nantucket, it would be safe, because it was really, we went there every summer. We had a lot of families that also went there every summer, so you'd always have your summer friends.
Sure.
It's a very small island, it's very enclosed, and there's only one town, and from the time you're 8 or 9, and certainly 10, our parents would let us run free in town.
Yeah, because there's cell phones or anything, right?
Yeah, there's no trouble. We were on our bikes. You get to anywhere on the island.
You got $5 in your pocket, and you're good. Yeah.
And so that was you never think that's where you're going to be a cult leader. So all those things.
Yeah, probably not, right?
Yeah, all those things work against you, and the idea that would just never happen in my experience anyway. Because I talk to people a lot from the point of view of, there's some valid fears we might all hold in life, even though we don't think about them daily, in the sense of, I could get some horrible illness, like we were talking earlier about, those things can happen. You could have a horrible accident that may cripple you. You may have a natural catastrophe, like out here in LA, an earthquake that might destroy your family or everything you own. So those are valid fears, but no one ever says, well, dude, you could also get involved in a cult, basically give away everything you earn and not see your family for 15 years. You'd be like, that is not even on my radar. Like, that will never happen to me.
Not me.
And I was that guy.
Wow.
So a lot of the reasons I tell my story, and I tell it almost any opportunity I can, is to inform people that as long as they sit in the same seat where I sat, of thinking this would never happen to me, you are as vulnerable as I was, because you will just never see it. You will never identify what's really happening.
Yeah. What was the first meeting like with?
It was very
Freddie.
Freddie. Yeah, but I call him Freddie because it's very healing for me to call him Freddie, because at the time I had to call him Frederick, and it was all very serious.
Sure.
So now for me it's much more healing to call him, hey, it's Freddie the con artist.
Yeah.
But
energy in our words, right?
Exactly, it really is. And so I met Freddie on the beach, and he just started kind of jumping into this dogma of Eastern philosophy, yin and yang type things, and and these are things.
And you're 16. How old is he at this
time?
Like
mid-30s.
30. Okay.
Yeah. So and I really appreciated the fact that he was speaking to me like an adult, like a peer. That's a very effective technique. He was also framing a lot of the conversation by saying, "Well, listen, you're very smart, so you'll understand this."
Oh yeah, sure.
Which, what can you say when someone says that?
Sure.
It's like, I don't understand. You're not going to say that at that point.
Right.
And so most of it was going over my head. But having been brought up, and I really wasn't even religious. I mean, we were a very moral family. We went to church, but at 13, we were given the option of whether we wanted to still go to church, and church was really never my thing. And so I'd stopped going. So I always had a belief in God and a faith in the sense that there is a benevolent force that kind of controls all, but I never felt the need to do it in a group setting or in a building, that sort of
every
thing.
Sunday at night. You still hold that belief?
Yeah, exactly. I do. Because the thing is, I tell people that's one of the most common questions after going through something that was religious based. I said, is has this affected your faith or
Sure.
or destroyed your faith in God or
Right,
whatever. I
right.
said, in actual fact, it's reinforced it, because all I really ever prayed for while I was in the cult was this understanding of what the hell was going on as
Yeah.
far as the situation I was in. And now that I do understand it and I can talk about it, I actually got the answer to my prayers. So it actually taught me that your prayers do get answered, just not necessarily on the timeline you may expect them to.
Right.
But it was one of these things that it reinforced the fact that definitely there was something looking out for me, and that ultimately I really do believe we're never put in a situation we can't handle, and that's why one of the things I say to people all the time is, I do believe we've all been dealt a winning hand. The challenge is learning how to play it.
Yeah, right.
And so you just,
Well
for
said.
me, my faith has broken down to I will never find myself in a situation I can't handle. It's just how willing I'm willing to embrace it as a learning experience, rather than the more destructive approach, which is, this shouldn't be happening and it needs to be different.
Sure. Yeah,
Just
yeah,
embrace
yeah.
like crises are actually opportunities for growth, and
Yep.
I've learned that, and I've watched myself go through it and my friends, and the moment it's happening, this is, you're up to the challenge, so just embrace it.
Yeah.
And that's been a really useful tool over the years. And
So you meet Frederick
yes.
at 16. No cell phones back then, right? I mean,
No cell phones. So
I'm
yeah,
the same age
but
as you.
because
What was
it's
that,
a
79, right?
Yeah,
You were born
it was like
60? You got a
78,
birthday coming up when?
79,
April.
April.
You'll
exactly.
be
57.
57. Yeah, I'll be 56 in November.
Yeah.
So you meet this guy up there, and then you come back to high school, and then you go to London,
Yeah,
and then you're
I'm-
at Princeton. How did
Yeah,
that relationship?
basically because the island's so small, I would bump into him here and there,
Sure.
and he was
by
just
design, I'm sure.
Well,
yeah,
I mean, just because the nature of the island being small,
Yeah.
and he was on a bike. He never drove anything, car. So he was just around, and then he was very social. He would have these parties, and at 16, the drinking age I think was 18 back then.
Yeah, it was.
And so I could go to these parties and get my friends, and it was an option for free beer.
Yeah.
I actually thought I was working him.
Right.
I could go to these parties, we get the beer, we kind of hang out for a
Yeah.
while.
Maybe meet some ladies
He was
or
all
something,
he was
yeah.
all into astrology. The people at the party would be anywhere from 16 to like 80.
Yeah.
And he had some high society people from New York, which meant nothing to me. But this was kind of the environment that he circled in, and I've met people who knew him from those days who were more his peer group, and he basically had this racket going where he rented this house, and then he'd invite all these friends, and they would pay a portion, and they'd end up basically paying, so he would be there rent free.
Yeah, right.
And he ran the house kind of like a ship. It's kind of like there was going to be a party every night, and so they had to have everything prepared, and then the party would go on, and then they had to be up in the morning, clean everything, restock the bar,
Drugs
clean
too?
the place. Drugs, no, I was not partaking in drug, but drug culture was huge back then.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Cocaine
Yeah,
in the 80s.
yeah,
and all,
exactly.
yeah.
Cocaine and LSD, and they were doing stuff like
Was
that.
he into
He
drinking
was-
and drugs?
No,
then?
no,
Or-
he was, and I was not aware of that at that
Right,
time.
yeah.
But yes, he was, and the friends I met who were his peers were all kind of like, yeah, it was the '70s, and we're all having a good time.
Yeah, right.
And so, but when I met him, he was going through this transition from going from kind of a socialite into becoming this kind of spiritual teacher. And you have to remember that was late '70s, early '80s. That's when the whole kind of new age thing. And he was kind of an early precursor to like the health food thing. He was all into health food. So all those things were just starting to enter into the psyche of the world. And
Sure.
like I remember, when I went to see him in New York, and just the idea of going to a health food store, like I didn't know that you did
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
and he was eating organic foods and mostly vegetables and all
You're
these sort of
crushing
things.
Philly cheesesteaks.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Geno's
exactly.
are bats, man.
exactly.
Two Philly
that's the way it
guys.
should be. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
So yeah.
So
it was-
then at Princeton, how did you stay connected to
Well,
him? Just in the summers?
basically the way it played out was I'd seen him in the summers, and like I said, there wasn't some hardcore push to kind of indoctrinate me in the sense that we think of it. But he'd suggested some books for me to read, and it wasn't really until he found that I was going to Princeton, because I'd gone to school in England. I'd come back, and that summer I said, I'm going to go to Princeton. He's like, well, you have to come visit me in New York. And I'm like, okay. He goes, no, I go out all the time. I go to Studio 54. So again, here's another opportunity where I'm thinking, oh, I'm working this guy. He's like, yeah, come up with a couple friends. We literally get waltzed right into Studio 54.
Right.
I'm
He
18,
pays the tab.
18 years old, yeah.
Right.
And I'm
Pretty people, right?
Oh yeah, introduced to this whole other. I mean, I remember the first time I went into Studio 54. I was greeted by this girl wearing nothing but Scotch tape. She had like a tape along here and like a Scotch tape bikini,
right.
and that was it. And I'm thinking,
the old Scotch tape bikini.
Yeah,
huh?
I'm like, I don't think I ever want to leave here. And,
Yeah, right.
and you know, people are having sex on the dance floor. There's like cocaine and everything. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So it was just this kind of going through the looking glass, and he was the conduit. So again, not the behavior that you think a cult leader is doing. You know, so I'm not getting any of the red flags that people might think of that you would, because again, this is not knowing how the myriad of cults exist out there, and that there's, you know, we all think that they're going to be like wearing orange and living in some ranch in Colorado.
Shaved heads.
It's just not like that. You know, those exist,
right?
But that's not. You know, there's 10,000 cults they know of and track in America that are active today.
10,000,
and the majority of them, like our group, are less than 100 or even less than 50, so they're virtually invisible to society. They may have begun as a Bible study group or a book club, or
right.
I met this one girl who had started as a knitting club.
Right. Wow.
So you just never know what form it's going to initially take, but ultimately becomes this controlling environment that ends up controlling people's lives.
So then you get out of Princeton, and you're in New York. You got a great model.
I moved right in with him. You know,
You moved in with him.
With the
So
group.
physically lived in a house?
It was an apartment.
Right.
So he had about, at that point, maybe 3 or 4 people had apartments in the building. So he had one apartment. He would sleep, it was a 1-bedroom apartment. He would sleep in the bedroom, and then depending on who was around, I was one of 2 people that lived there with him. So I actually had like a space about this large in the closet that was mine. Everything else was communal.
And that was it.
And then I would have a 1-inch foam rubber futon that I'd roll out every night, and that was my bed.
Wow.
So even for the next 5 years, as my modeling career took off, and I'm literally flying on the Concorde and staying in 5-star hotels, I would still come back to New York, sleep on that 1-inch futon.
Wow.
And that was my life.
Because you did work for Donna Karan, right?
Donna Karan, Ralph Lauren, you know, Dunhill.
So you're making a ton of cash.
Yeah.
And you're giving it to him, or what do you do?
Yeah, ultimately, that's the way it played out, because when you join a group like this, and again, you don't know you're joining. You actually thought I was part of this thing that was starting, and I was kind of, you know, one of the early, you know, kind of adapters to this whole thing, that, you know, this new spiritual movement. So you don't recognize it as something you've joined. It's just happens.
Yeah,
right?
It's just life, right?
But what had happened with the catalyst for him kind of moving from being kind of a narcissist with an entourage to actually becoming more cult-like and actually becoming a full-fledged cult, was there had been this metaphysical writer named Ruth Montgomery, and she had been a very successful political journalist for years, and like press attaché to 6 presidents and that sort of thing. So very legitimate. And then later in her life, she had met a medium, and so she just kind of became curious about the other side, so to speak. And then this medium passed away. And then she would go to her typewriter and go into this trance, and she would start to type stuff that she didn't know where it came from. She called this automatic typing.
Right.
And then she would take her journalistic investigator mindset and start investigating what had just been, you know, typed, and started to find that a lot of these things that she was typing were absolutely accurate, and it was in different metaphysical topics. And she soon, along the way, recognized that it was. She claimed it was this medium who was crossed over to the other side, had found some like-minded individuals, and they were using her as a conduit to pass through this information.
Yeah. Right.
So she had written like 7 or 8 books at that point, and had a great following. And Freddie at that point had a sidekick, this guy named John Andreatis, who was like my age and been with him since he was like 14, kind of was like a protege. Wingman, and he had mastered all the yogic positions by the time he was 15, and he could just memorize scripture and just kind of go through and was very eloquent and could just talk for hours about and Freddie could do that as well, but John was really like next level.
Right.
So John had reached out to Ruth saying, "Oh, I want to tell you about this, my teacher," and basically, Ruth then consults her guides, is what she called them, in this automatic typing thing, and they basically verify that he's the real deal.
Wow.
So all this shtick that he's been passing on,
Yeah.
he's now got street cred,
Right.
and that's when the whole game
From the other side,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Oh, what
and that's when the
crazy
whole. And so
shit.
we ended up having we had to create an office, and we started doing seminars, and we had a radio show and a TV show, and book lists and all these and we created audio tapes, and it became a business.
Yeah.
And then it became about recruitment and all that sort of, and then it really became like a full-fledged cult.
Right.
So that was the transition, and that's what kind of happened. And because I was there from the beginning, I didn't really know
ground floor of a startup.
I didn't know anything.
That's usually a good thing to be on the ground floor of a startup.
Exactly. So
then did you move from
so
New
because
York,
of that,
LA?
I mean, basically, I would never think of taking savings and taking something for myself. It was all contributing to the group and what the
Sure.
group was, because with this doomsday prognosis, Freddie was always saying, like, around the
Yeah, but you're making $500,000 a year. I mean,
at my peak, I was making over $1 million a year.
Yeah,
wow. and which is nothing compared to what the girls make, but it's not bad money.
Yeah.
And I was giving it all away. I would take enough money to pay my bills, and I would hand everything else over.
Wow. And then
And with the smile on my face, thinking, like, because from my point of view,
for the greater good, right?
Yeah, exactly, greater good. And it seemed like the more I gave it away, the more I made.
Yeah, right.
It just kind of worked out that way. Now, you can't say whether that was actually accurate, but that was my
Well, there's
perception.
a correlation there or
Yeah,
not. You
exactly,
probably still, I mean,
exactly.
So at what point did you realize that you were in? So you were in for 20 years.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, because I met him when I was 16.
Right.
I started living with him around like 21 when I graduated college.
Right.
And then I escaped when I was 37.
So at what point? So you escaped, don't it? Because we want to hear about that.
Yeah.
Because Fabio helped you, right?
Yeah, he
is
did.
that right? So
He
Fabio
did.
is up. Yeah, I love it. So hold on.
You can't write this stuff, right?
No. So at what point did you realize that you're like, oh shit, man? I gotta get out of this.
It's a very common question, and I wish I could tell you that
Tuesday at 4 o'clock,
that I woke up one night and I'm like, oh my god, I think this is really dangerous. It may be a cult, and I should probably get the hell out of here.
Yeah, right.
Not even close.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, Freddie had passed away in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and in 1990, simultaneously, 5 days after he died, a Vanity Fair article came out as a massive expose calling us a cult, and was just like, the worst PR nightmare you could go through. Kind of a huge scandal. Everyone in the fashion industry heard about it, and
Did the fashion industry know you were in it?
no, because again, it's like, here's this misunderstanding of
Under the radar,
the word cult too. It's like they knew I was involved in something, and there were a lot of new age groups around, and I was kind of promoting it as such, and that's just not a label that people would comfortably use, because that sounds again like Jonestown, and it didn't seem like I was, I'm living a double life. I'm out there making $1 million as a model and traveling. People are like, he can't be in a cult, can he?
Yeah, right.
So it's very similar to kind of like the Tom Cruise thing with Scientology. You maintain a public persona. I lived this double life of where, yes, I would show up at work. I was, very professional. I was very,
fit, looking good. Always,
I was kind. I was considered, all these sort of things.
No abuse of alcohol or
No,
drugs.
all of that, and yet I had to call in every night. I was being monitored. My whole life was being controlled. I had to kind of regurgitate, like, how had I supported the principles we all stand by on that day,
Sure.
And, the worst thing about living a double life is, for me, I ended up feeling like I was never, ever being honest with anyone at any time. Because, first of all, I am out there in the world. I've got friends from college and people from before, and now people in the industry that I consider to be friends and have a connection with, and that was taboo in the group. Like, your only people that you were supposed to consider your brothers and sisters were your spiritual family.
So you disconnected a lot from your family.
Yes,
almost
and
totally.
and almost completely. And I
you
didn't see my parents for 12 years.
12 years,
but
yeah.
but it's this type of thing of where you're just in general, it was supposed to be only about the group.
And what were they saying? Like your brother, I know Rory is my brother. And I mean, what were they when they ever did get a chance? Did they just say, "Man, you lost your mind? What are you doing?"
Rory was a great example, because when I tell my story, which I'm doing a docuseries about my whole experience,
Yeah, we wanna talk about that,
Rory's story is such a great one, because he, in my opinion, behaves the ideal way you'd want a brother to behave in this situation. Because initially, he gave me tons of leeway, because my mother is quite a dominant personality, so there's a natural kind of repercussion of a parent that's strong for the kid to rebel and kind of seek their own kind of individuality. So he went through a period of like that, which kind of derailed the family a bit because he was trying to find his own way.
Yeah, right.
And so when I was going through this, he said, "Okay, it's weird, but he's just doing what I did."
Yeah, right.
So he cut me
It'll
all.
all be fine.
He cut me all. My mother immediately recognized it's something dangerous. It's a cult. I'm like, it's not a cult. Like, so Rory was actually an initial ally.
Mother's intuition, man.
Yeah,
it's usually right.
No one knows you like your mother does. Learn that.
Yeah, my kids know that.
Yeah,
and I know it too.
And so when the Vanity Fair article came out, that's when Rory said, "Oh man, I missed the boat on this one. I got this wrong." And now the fascinating thing, he goes, "They're calling it a cult, and I really don't know anything about cults." So this is what's extraordinary. He starts studying up on cults,
right?
And because the key to all of this is getting information, you
right.
know, and that's the whole reason I tell my stories, because people, you can't help or save anyone. People help and save themselves, and one of the great tools we do that through is information.
So well said, man.
So Rory got information and goes, "Oh shit, this is a cult, and I got to do something about it." Now my mother's been kind of, chanting this for years, and because of that has created a very adversarial and antagonistic relationship with me.
Right.
So really, the way it played out, Rory was the only one left in the family who hadn't really confronted me, and so he was able to take some steps to try to do an intervention, because I saw him as an ally. I had seen someone who had been empathetic and sympathetic to my choices, and so he now could actually, on some level, being deceptive, but kind of continue those bridges to see if he could get me, into a situation where maybe I could get the information.
Right.
And back at that time, so they did try to do an intervention. They've learned a lot about interventions since then, and it's not the way they would do it now.
Right.
But back then, it was a weekend. It had been set up kind of like a boys' weekend. There was another buddy of mine from Princeton who Rory knew, and we were all mutual friends, and so we all went up there for this boys' weekend, and it ended up being this intervention.
Right.
And so the door was always open. It's kind of like a hotel room, not unlike this. And but because the approach at that time was really about trying to blow holes in the philosophy and taking a very kind of academic approach, and my attachment to the group was
just to try to break through your beliefs, right?
Yeah,
but you made just one little breakthrough where you go, shit.
Well, that's what you're hoping for. But the truth was, my connection to the group was emotional.
Yeah. And
in actual fact, I was not a very good cult member in the sense that I was not studying the scriptures. I'm jumping around the world. I'm being a fashion model. It's like I'm supposed to be studying these things in the airplane. And, it's like I'm not doing that.
I'm not. Music, whatever.
I'm jet lagged, whatever. And so the way I'm perceiving it is, if I'd done my homework, I'd be able to just completely support and blow holes in all their arguments.
Sure.
But because they've got all this information and they're throwing it into what our group supposedly stands for, that I can't back up because I haven't done my homework.
Right.
The only place I can go to is dig my heels in and say, I'm not letting you throw my friends under the bus.
Right.
And Freddie had just died.
So
and,
now there's the emotion.
So
because we act from emotions, right?
Totally.
We
so
it's
a massive impasse.
We act from logic.
Yeah, it's a massive impasse, and it didn't work. And then from that point on, I consider Rory to be my greatest betrayer.
Yeah.
Because he had like my youngest brother Garth used to say to me, like, years down the line after that, while I was still in the group, he's like, Rory he feels bad about what happened. He wants to talk. I'm like, Garth, Rory thinks I'm in a cult. He's an asshole. Why would I ever talk to him?
Yeah, right.
And cut to when I finally did escape and did figure things out, and I actually got married. Rory was my best man.
Yeah. So that's cool. Tell us about the escape.
Yeah.
And then we're going to shift to life afterwards.
So basically, the Vanity Fair article comes out, Freddie dies, there's a power struggle,
right.
And the group kind of goes from being this stereotypical cult with recruitment and media.
Still based in New York.
Yeah, but then we moved everything, because now we're under the radar. We're on the radar and under, the
investigations and everything.
Yeah, so we moved the whole operation down to North Carolina, because that was always the plan, is, Freddie, in his stories of how the end of the world was coming, it was like the mountains of North Carolina were going to be, beachfront property.
Oh,
I can laugh about this now.
Yeah, good.
But it's like, so we were going to be there, and then that's when, it's like, there was this whole crazy kind of sci-fi element that maybe the space people are going to come bail us out. I mean, all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But we were down there, and we had 4 years of stored food and bunkers and guns. And quite honestly, I'd signed up for more of the Star Wars type of thing, like the space people were going to come get us, and we're going to be put in the rejuvenation machines, and we're going to kind of repopulate the world. I mean, I would literally, in my modeling days, when that was when kind of tanning machines had just come out, and Freddie was always tan, and I was always tan. It's like it was like popular in the 80s.
Yeah, sure.
And I remember people looking at me going, like, dude, you hit the tanning machine a little bit more? And I'm like, too much. And I'm like, no, you have no idea. Like, I'm going to be in the rejuvenation chamber, when this all goes down. So I'm fine. I mean, literally, that's how my head was, So this is how deep down the rabbit hole you'll go.
Sure.
So basically, during this, there was a power struggle. We ended up down in North Carolina. The guy who became the leader did not have nearly the savvy or charisma or skills that Freddie had. But we were also programmed and brainwashed at that point. You could just push the buttons and maintain some sort of thing, but we became very isolationist. We were kind of preparing for the end of the world, and meanwhile, I was still financing it. I was still traveling a lot. So they were.
So were you the main financier of this whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody else was really working.
There were people. I mean,
but not your kind.
Not the kind of money.
Right,
I had financed businesses down there so they could start doing work, but we were doing things like building houses, but. It was the type of thing, because of the so-called spiritual principles, you would sand a wall to make it perfect, saying that when someone walks in, they're going to recognize all the hard work that goes on. Well, it took you 4 times as much time to sand that wall than everyone else does. So the labor costs in every house we were building was astronomical. So we weren't making money on any house because it took forever to build these things because everything had to be perfect.
Yeah, right.
And someone else is just walking in going, why is this house 3 times the house is next
just
door?
Give me that one.
Yeah. So it was a fiasco.
That's crazy.
But ultimately...
So how'd the escape go?
So what ends up happening is the millennium's approaching. And because I'm traveling and the rest of the group is down in North Carolina and kind of in the bubble, I've still got like 1 foot in reality. And I'm a lot of Freddie's predictions were like there were going to be storms and governments collapsing and all these kind of signs, right? So I'm in London and I'm in Milan or I'm in Paris. I'm going, everything looks pretty good here. Like, I don't think this is going down the way he said.
Right.
If anything, the timeline's off.
Right.
But it's kind of my critical thinking starting to come back a little bit.
Good.
And so, unfortunately, the way I dealt with that was to start voicing my concerns to the group, and then I got basically painted as a blasphemer and and a heretic on some level. So then it's like, oh, we've got to save Hoyt from himself.
Right.
And the dictate came down that I had to stop modeling and I had to go down.
You shaved your head or something, right?
Yeah. So basically, it's like they had pretty much said, well, because all you've ever been your whole life is a model, even though I'd gone to Princeton, economics major, always been kind of a bright guy.
Yeah.
It's like you're completely useless. Any of us, because they were doing construction and things that I didn't really know anything about.
Right.
So like your only use would be to be basically the house servant. So and the whole approach was to reindoctrinate me by humiliating me. They brought me down there. They shaved my head so I couldn't model. So that was off the table. Bald was not beautiful back then.
Yeah, it's cool now.
It's cool now, but back then I could have had some tattoos. It would have been great. But back then it was not cool. And so I had to be the first one up, the last one to bed, do any type of slave-like labor that no one else would want to do was my job.
Right, so
and do
totally
it,
vulnerable.
Do it selflessly with a smile on my face and do all these type of things. And of course, I'm not really having the best time, and I'm kind of harboring some resentment, and I'm not going about it with a real smile on my face because I'm looking in the mirror and I look like a convict. I'm thinking I could be in Europe right now. In Paris or Milan, literally kissing Cindy Crawford and Naomi Campbell and making $15,000 a day, which I'd rather be doing than scrubbing the toilet right now. So I guess I'm not spiritual. Right. So I'm having this massive conflict.
Right.
And then I would face a firing squad. And what I mean by that is I would face a verbal assault of whoever was around the house that night. It would usually be anywhere from 10 to 15 people. Who had watched my behavior that day, and they were just going to verbally assault me of what a selfish, hypocritical, turd I was. And they would blast me verbally for sometimes 2 hours. Sometimes they go on 10, 12 hours. And you literally go catatonic. You know,
right,
and you're so afraid to say anything that you say nothing, and you really go into the fight, flight, or fright. You know, sequence.
You feel threatened physically?
We didn't deal with each other that way, but it's mental intimidation. You know, and it's more frightening because it's on a soul level.
Right.
You know, because you know, the whole premise of all this belief system, which is not inaccurate, is we're spirit, not body. So the actual physical intimidation wasn't. It was more about the karmic ramifications. So it's like, you know, you've lived lifetimes. You've now had this opportunity. If you blow it now, just imagine, you know, it'll be how many lifetimes before you'll ever get another chance. So it's all that type of mental warfare is going on.
So how'd you break out?
So basically, I basically got to the point where I'm saying, you know, they're not going to ever stop. And clearly they're the true seekers. I am not getting it. And basically I identified myself as being someone who was broken and unfixable.
Right.
So my rationale for finally leaving was not, oh, they're being mean to me, this is bad, this is dangerous. It's actually, they're doing the real thing. They've been telling me for 20 years what a turd I am. I'm finally seeing it's true. The least I could do to help them is to relieve them of my dead weight. So all this time, and I'm telling you, a lot of time is being spent on me, they can do towards something constructive. That's how I rationalized getting out the door. And they caught me twice, but I finally got away.
And then when they caught you twice, you just...
You know, it's like
walked out at night.
It's like basically I had gotten away, but I went to New York, so I thought they'll never think I'm going to go to my New York apartment because that would be stupid. And of course, they did go to the New York apartment. So that happened. And
so they just physically bring you back on it?
Yeah, because I mean, again, it's that type of psychosis you're in where you think like, I guess I'm not supposed to get away.
Yeah, right.
You know, and you start believing that everything is actually working to your benefit. You don't realize that. This is actually, and the second time they caught me, and I was in New York, I remember I was in a fourth floor apartment. I remember looking out the window because one guy was actually slept in the doorway, so he knew I couldn't leave. And I remember looking out the window and thinking I'd probably break my legs, but maybe I should jump
40 feet. Yeah.
I thought about it. So, but I went back down, and eventually
Sure.
I finally did get away, and that's why when I left, I went into PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because I really had not identified what it was. Yep. So I was in this depressed state. I thought, I've left God's work. I'm going to basically get crushed. I'm going to get either hit by a car or struck down by lightning or something horrible is going to happen. And the only place I could think of where I could go where no one would ask me, what the hell are you doing here? First of all, I'm showing up with a shaved head. Was Fabio's.
Right.
Because Fabio was...
so you and him were friends now?
We were friends from the time... he's one of the first models I met in New York. We used to work out together at the Vertical Club.
Sure, yeah.
It was his whole scene.
Yeah.
And Fabio's just, an old, dear, incredibly loyal guy.
Yeah.
And, he had gone out to L.A. and became this huge celebrity.
Sure.
And he was always saying, did you come out to L.A., become a celebrity like me? I'm like, well, yeah, easier said than done, Fabio.
Yeah, right.
But... he had always had this open door policy. So whenever I did go to LA, I would always stay with him, and he always just said, anytime. And so this one time, again, I didn't know how long I was going to stay there, but I just showed up there, and he no questions asked. He never, bless his heart, he kind of had so much going on in his life. He never really just said,
and that's out here. He came
out here. Yeah, he was in Beverly Hills, and I ended up staying there about a year, which was perfect because I didn't need someone asking me the questions. I didn't have the answers, and I really didn't want to deal with even trying to figure it out because I was literally thawing out. And the way they describe it clinically is when you've been in a highly abusive environment and you finally have left that environment, it takes at least 12 months, if not even 24, before you can consider the idea it's not just you and your fault and because you're so awful.
Sure.
That maybe the environment you're in has something to do with how horrible you feel.
Right. And that abusiveness sometimes is our own even, right?
Oh.
So the thoughts that we have about ourselves, they're just perpetrated by the other people.
Absolutely.
So that's what I think people can connect with. Like you said, not many people are going to connect I was in a cult. I mean, the story, although you have numbers now where there's a lot more people, it's that abuse of what we do to ourselves, right?
Well, yeah, and
Socrates, know yourself. That's
exactly.
Slow down.
And the thing is,
pay attention.
We've all been in those relationships where we feel like it's always our fault, right? Because that person's always doing that to us. So we've all had that, and the other side of it was because I was on the road all the time. People think like, oh well, wasn't it easier for you because you weren't in the 24/7 like they were, in the bubble?
Not physically.
And I said, well, actually, it was worse because, to the point you're making, I was my own worst prison guard because I understood the principles, but I had no one to watch guard me. So I was constantly analyzing, like, oh, you're cutting a corner here, you're cutting a corner there, and then I would lie to the group when I had to check in at night because I didn't want to get in trouble. So I'm kind of spin doctoring, And then of course the people on the outside, I'm not telling them that I'm involved in this group. So this is where I was saying, like, I felt like I was lying.
Yeah, when we're outside of truth, man, we're screwed.
So you become your own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And so
being in truth is the best in the world, isn't it, man?
But it's one of these things, and it's one of these things I love. When I just, we were talking earlier about this documentary that's come out now about these kids that were abused by Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And one of the guys made this, which I recommend for people who haven't seen it. Not an easy watch, but wonderful
I gotta watch
teaching tool.
Yeah.
But one of these kids say that was something so important that I identified with. He goes, when you've been living the lie, and obviously you don't know you're living the lie, but when you've been living the lie with such fervor and vehement attitude, and at some point you recognize that it is a lie. You can call it the life lie. We do it in screenwriting terms all the time.
Sure.
Your lead character is often living a life lie, and then something happens that forces them to deal with reality.
Sure.
So for me, it was
an
kind
exciting
of
incident, right?
Yeah. So there's a point when you finally identify, oh my God, I got this all wrong, and you have to go back, and now for me going back to 16 on that day on the beach and start reframing my entire life from that's when the manipulation began. From that day forward, which is a lot of work, and start recognizing
25 years, right?
Yeah, 25 years. And that's where you realize that because you're starting to embrace the truth, and it takes a while before you can start to articulate to others what that really is.
Yeah, right.
But when you finally gain your confidence and you get the education and you start to learn that that you can forgive yourself, because the situation I found myself in, I can categorically say almost anyone in that same situation would more or less behave the same way I did.
Yeah, man.
It wasn't because my parents didn't love me enough, or I'm too naive, or
Sure.
gullible, or all. This is the way we react to someone kind of snowing us over and treating us well and telling us that we're special and all. We're vulnerable in these areas.
Sure,
And,
Frederick, or boyfriends, girlfriends. I mean, even for
Exactly.
young people that listen, high school, college.
But what ends up happening, to your point about the truth, is when you finally identify the truth, now you have to support the truth with the same fervor and vehement attitude you did with the lie.
Absolutely. And the key
that's-
word, yeah.
and that's what I love these kids. They're men now, but they were just like, I lived the lie, because they're all like, why now? And it's like, listen, you get to a point where it doesn't matter what fallout it's going to occur.
Right.
You just have to own the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
when I finally realized I had been in a cult and knew what that word meant and knew what my experience was, I would literally get in a cab in New York and I'd be like, okay, I need to go to 38th and 2nd. Did I tell you I was in a cult? Yeah, 15, 20 years. Yeah, really. I mean, it was like a compulsion. I didn't want someone to see me and see the kind of impression you would get just from looking at me.
Sure, right.
I was like, no, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Because I lived that lie for so long. I'm like, no, I need others to
And that's what
hear
got you
my
back
truth.
to where you are now.
Exactly.
Right? The ability for us to see the truth.
And that's what I realized, like, not only, I went down this journey, but everyone you care about, it's like if you have an addict in the family, everyone who cares about you gets involuntarily taken on this journey with you.
Sure, yeah.
And of course, in the way human nature is, everyone blames themselves on somebody, like, I should have said something, I could have done something. But the truth is, none of us knew what we were up against,
Right,
and so it became my job in a certain way, not only to process my own experience and forgive myself, but then simultaneously develop the communication skills to talk about my experience in a way that was fostering the conversations I could have with my siblings or my parents or my friends, to foster those conversations where the healing could take place, where they could start to understand there's nothing you could have done.
Right.
You have to forgive yourself too, because
Sure.
it was the blind thing. I didn't know I was in a cult. You didn't know I was in a cult.
Well,
You
that
don't even know what a cult
examination-
is.
That examination of our past choices it's just regret then, man, right?
Absolutely.
And that is not an energy. that's
But
gonna
the
move us
only way
forward.
you heal it is through conversation. So
and through forgiveness. You said it a
well,
couple
exactly.
times.
But that's the thing. So that's why I talk about it all the time,
Yeah.
because I realize, like, not only do I want to foster those conversations with the people that went on that journey with me,
Right.
but I want just to provide like access to information that's not readily available.
Sure.
You know, there's a ton of information that now exists around the subject matter, you know, but it's not readily available. So the more people are talking about it, the more the more opportunity. Because ultimately, like I said, people are going to do what they want for themselves.
Sure.
But at least if they have access to information, there's a chance with that information facing a situation like I was in, there might be a different choice that goes on.
Yeah, right.
And that's all you're hoping for.
Yeah, so you're doing so you're out here now. You're doing acting, some screenwriting. I know you've talked about
producing.
that,
I've produced 5 movies, and
Mm-hmm.
I've acted in like 30 movies now, and
Mm-hmm.
so I'm always kind of doing something. I mean,
And
and they talk about the creative arts being the best way to kind of rebuild your self-esteem when you've been
Yeah.
through a very destructive and abusive environment.
Mm-hmm.
The creative arts is a fantastic means, whether it's through writing or painting or
Music.
dancing or whatever. You start to recognize that you've got a lens through which you see the world.
Well, the arts
that
hit
can-
our soul, right, man?
yeah, and
Our
you realize
essence.
that lens, part of it, that lens was this history you had. That
Yeah.
part of it was uncomfortable. But you
Yeah.
start to say, well, that uncomfortable experience actually gave me a very unique point of view that I can put in my art, and I can see value in others do
Sure.
as well, and that's very healing.
A lot of times people will ask me, you know, do I wish the accident didn't happen to me? You know, where I died, came back, and
Right.
you know, I look at them now and I say, no, you know, no.
Yeah.
But I wish my friend didn't die.
Right.
So, do you wish this whole experience didn't happen?
No, I don't. And the way I describe it to folks is I say it's a school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
I took some very expensive and lengthy lessons.
Yeah.
But it taught me life lessons and values that I'm so grateful for, and it's given me a depth of empathy and compassion I wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
And I kind of have for lack of a better description, a radar where I can sense when someone's in an abusive environment.
Really
I
cool.
think if I'd been a
An
cocaine,
intuition.
yeah, if I'd been a cocaine addict, you can always recognize another addict.
Sure. Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you
yeah.
see, you know the tells.
Yeah, right.
So I can see that demeanor, that posture, that feeling. And granted, maybe in that situation, there's not much I can do, but I can express kindness to that person and
Beautiful, yeah.
sensitivity.
Right on.
And sometimes, you know,
That's
when
enough.
you're having a rough day, that helps.
Lead with
So
love, right, man?
yeah, so I'm grateful for that, and like I said, it's also turned me into the artist that I am today.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always a method to the madness.
There is.
Yeah.
So we get some wisdom, right? You and I were
Yeah,
chatting about
yeah.
wisdom is now the soundness. The definition is great. The soundness of our decision making and our actions based on our experience and our knowledge that we've gotten. So you and I laughed. You know, I say, okay, give us a little bit of wisdom
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
said, well, the wisdom is that we don't get wiser as we
Yeah,
get older.
exactly. I'm certainly getting older. I keep waiting for the wisdom, but you know,
Yeah,
I have learned a lot, and
So what would you offer people? I don't care if they're 18. You know, I got
you know,
our daughter Lizzie's going to Penn next year to run Ivy
there's
League.
two things we talked about it earlier that you know I certainly want to bring up.
Yeah.
That sometimes no one tells us that feeling good too fast can be dangerous. So you know we encounter certain personalities that are bigger than life and kind of sweep us off our feet, and they're very complimentary. And we can get very caught up in that, and generally no one says actually that's dangerous.
Right.
So that would be one thing I'd say. The other thing I'd also referenced earlier when we were talking is a natural progression in life is we go through transitions where we start to maybe ask some of the bigger questions. Like,
Sure.
you know, why am I here? What is the world about? What am I supposed to do with my life? Am I going to leave a footprint? You know, what who am I?
Sure, how can I be of
Right?
service, right?
Yeah, exactly. And no one tells you that as beautiful of a process that is a time when you're actually very vulnerable, because unfortunately we as humans that's a lot of hard work to answer those questions. And what we don't realize is the reason we're vulnerable, if we are seeking answers and we find someone who from our point of view seems to be providing those answers, we're going to perceive that to be a very good thing.
Yeah, right.
And that can be like in a healthy relationship. If you and I are talking, Danny, and I say something, and you're like, oh, I never thought of it that way, and you're kind of connecting a couple dots. And,
Yeah, sure.
And I'd be like, oh, you should read this book I read, or I learned it through this class, or I went through this life experience. Somehow I would instinctively relieve you of any feeling of debt that I've given you something per se.
Right.
Because you're just sharing information and say, oh, this is helpful to me. I'm glad you found that to be helpful. No big deal.
Right.
In the unhealthy relationship, it's like, well, Danny, if you have any more questions, I'm here for you. I want you to learn.
And you're a smart guy.
And I'm starting to set up this dynamic that I hold answers.
Right.
You're the teacher you're the student seeking.
Cool.
And I'm going to now encourage you to ask me more, and I'll keep providing these answers. And what will be occurring is this unconscious debt starts to accrue of where I feel an obligation to you now. Like, well, what can I do to pay you back?
Right.
And that's where the manipulation comes in.
Got
and
it.
that's where the control starts happening and that sort of thing. So those are a couple things that I realized that I wish we would make that more prevalent to people to recognize that that things that feel too good too fast can it's the same old adage, if it's too good to be true, usually it is.
Yeah, right.
I don't like to be pessimistic. I'm an optimistic person, but I've had to learn that it's very, very wonderful to trust people, and it's very smart not to.
Yeah,
so
right.
you have to find that balance.
Pay attention, right?
Yeah,
Pay
it really is,
attention.
and ultimately, I really do believe, as I was saying earlier, we're never put in a situation we can't handle.
Right.
And that's where faith, I think, really does start to encourage our lives. That if we just start to recognize that no matter what situation we're in, it's for our own benefit.
Yeah, right.
And I had a shaman man once tell me, he goes, you just got to learn to flip the tortilla. He goes, you think it's bad? Look at it now. It's good.
Yeah, that's it. I like it.
And there's always a way to look at things in a way. There's always a silver lining.
Yeah.
So that way, it's like, yeah, I'm a cult survivor, but I'm also that's a part of my biography that doesn't define me, but I'm always going to own it. And I love like what Brene Brown says. It's you got to own your stories, and the cure to shame is vulnerability, and then one of the best ways to be vulnerable is to tell your story.
That's it, man. And I certainly appreciate it here. So if I don't see you, and hopefully I'll see you when I get out here now.
Yeah.
If I don't see you until December of this year, right?
Yeah.
So let's go out 9 months or whatever. Hoyt, how's life with your business, with your movies, with your writing, with everything? And you say, Danny, it's fabulous. And I say, well, what happened since March when we were together? What's your vision for the next 9 months for you?
Well, I mean, as I was kind of expressing earlier, in the Hollywood world, you've got to have a lot of irons on the stove.
Right.
So I've got at least half a dozen projects that hopefully by the time in December, at least a couple of those will have manifested.
To movies.
Yeah, movies, or I've got a podcast series that could become a television series. I've got some scripts, that could become movies. I've got this docu-series that, I've got to...
I'll drop your script to Back from Heaven's Front Porch, too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, so it's that type of thing, but I think ultimately, the key is just feeling the connection to the people I love and care about. I mean, having lived a life where I fell for the ploy of like, oh, let's go save the world,
right.
And I now realize, like, I'm glad some people feel that way, and I hope they're in a position where they could actually maybe do that. I now recognize I'm not in that position, nor do I want that pressure, and I actually think the world's going to be fine the way it is.
I think it is, yeah.
So, but I do realize there are battles and things that I can directly impact, whether it's relationships or things that I want to achieve, or information I'd like to get out, and those are the things I'll focus on. And as long as I feel like I'm making traction in those areas, when December comes, if I said, I've made movement in those places, or even just found the better way to express what the way I wanted to tell this story, or what I've learned. I mean, it's we're all a work in progress, so it's constantly evolving and changing. And from telling your own story, like, you get tired of telling your story the same way, and it evolves over time. And you start to realize, like, oh, actually, there's another way to look at what's happened.
Absolutely.
Because we're constantly getting new information as life goes on. So
we are.
We're hopefully learning computers, but not Terminators.
We
have to deal with the Terminators and watch out for them, but we don't want to be those.
Keep an eye out for them. Right. But no space people are coming out.
I hope they do one of these days, but I don't think they're knocking on my door.
They're not knocking on mine either.
Maybe Captain Marvel. She was pretty. If they all look like
space person.
If they all look like Captain Marvel, I say Bring
That
'em
would
on.
be good.
Bring 'em on.
As long as they have a good heart, right?
That's
As long as they
right.
have a good heart.
Exactly.
So we're going to wrap up, but certainly I appreciate Hoyt being on the podcast here, Back to Life. And, you know, I came back to life after I died. You, in a sense, came back to life.
Absolutely.
And I think all of us, when we wake up every morning from our sleep, although we weren't really dead, we're back to life, you know? So I think some of the things that Hoyt spoke about is life's not perfect. We're going to make some decisions that may or may not produce the outcomes that we want, some negative ones, right?
Right.
What's really important is, you know, surround yourself with those people, faith, family, friends. Pay attention to that. As Brene Brown says, be vulnerable. Listen, we're going to screw up. Self-forgiveness is
Huge.
so key to that path back,
Yeah.
right? And then just understand that every day when we do get up, we can go create some really cool stuff for ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. All right, so thanks so much.
All
I'm
right,
a
brother.
hugger, brother. Good
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
Great hanging out with you.
Yeah,
Right? I'll see
absolutely.
you again. Say goodbye to everybody. Take it easy.
Go Eagles.
Yeah, go Birds.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Back to Life. Our conversation sure got me thinking about some things that I need to pay attention to in my life, and I trust the same occurred for you as well. So until next time, each day when you come back to life, be sure to always be inspired.